Who among us has not watched or heard about the series Peaky Blinders? The series that has won numerous awards and achieved unparalleled fame, with its episodes trending globally, making it one of the most popular series among audiences. It tells the story of a gang that emerged in Britain after World War I called the Peaky Blinders, led by Thomas Shelby. Surely, you have wondered at some point whether this bloody gang was actually real or just a figment of the writer's imagination. This is exactly what we will find out in this episode. But before diving into the details and events, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new updates. Before we start recounting the true story, let us talk about the series Peaky Blinders, which revolves around the Peaky Blinders gang, led by a man named Thomas Shelby, portrayed by the star Cillian Murphy. This man's life and personality changed after World War I. As for the events of the series, they take place after the World War, precisely in the 1920s, in Britain, specifically in the city of Birmingham. Without going into details, let's get to know the true story. In fact, the Peaky Blinders was a gang that appeared in the 19th century, precisely in 1870, in the city of Birmingham. It had a tight grip on the city and was composed of a group of criminals. According to historians, the name Peaky Blinders came from common slang used by people in the poor neighborhoods of Britain at the time. During the 1870s, Britain was suffering from a severe economic crisis. So, the important neighborhoods started becoming overcrowded, sinking into severe poverty. In the face of these conditions, theft and crime spread throughout these neighborhoods due to the lack of alternatives and people's need for money and food. Many residents worked in miserable conditions to earn some money and were exploited horribly by the wealthy and factory owners. However, some individuals had a different opinion. Instead of being exploited, they decided to take control of the capitalists and rid themselves of poverty. They engaged in illegal activities, such as extorting money from the nobles. Before the rise of the Peaky Blinders gang, the star of a previous gang called the Cheapside Sloggers, led by John Adrian, struck fear into the hearts of the city's residents. His main goal was to extort the nobles. Even the local newspaper in Birmingham reported on the gang members who carried out looting and vandalism across London. This news led to the spread of the Cheapside Sloggers' notoriety, encouraging other gangs to emerge. Among these gangs was the Peaky Blinders, which would become their first rival. The Peaky Blinders gang was founded by a man named Thomas Mucklow in the neighborhoods of Birmingham. The Peaky Blinders were considered one of the strongest gangs that emerged under difficult social circumstances. Their first operation was to seize and control the city. After overthrowing the Sloggers gang, it didn't take long for the Peaky Blinders to make their presence known. They sent a message to the newspaper introducing their identity and activities, and the first article about them was published on March 24, 1890. The article talked about an attack on a wealthy man named George Eastwood. After this article, their name and reputation rose to fame, spreading across Britain. They then began seizing land on Small Heath Street and some other neighborhoods. The Cheapside Sloggers were their first rival, but after losing their battle with the Peaky Blinders, the latter took control of an area that had belonged to the Sloggers. In the late 19th century, they started forming criminal partnerships, and their activities revolved around seizing money from the nobles and distributing it to the poor. They also engaged in extortion, fraud, illegal theft, and counterfeiting money. Additionally, they offered protection services, exploiting the absence of police in marginalized neighborhoods and protecting them in exchange for alliances. According to historian Heather Shore, they also fought against emerging and rising gangs. Thus, they played a central role that distinguished them from other gangs. They didn't stop there. The Peaky Blinders gang even attacked police officers, leading to many clashes. In 1897, a policeman named George Snipe was killed as a result of one of these conflicts. In 1901, another policeman named Charles Phillip was killed in Gunter, in addition to assaults on hundreds of others. Many of them quit their jobs as police officers due to the excessive violence they faced. In response to this situation, the Irish detective named Charles Houghton dedicated a special team to capture the Peaky Blinders gang. However, the gang was already aware of his plan due to the presence of numerous informants within the police force. The most dangerous member of the gang was nicknamed Kevin Mooney, whose real name was Thomas. He cleverly seized lands and taught the gang members the art of fraud. As for the other main members, they were David Taylor, Ernest Haynes, and Harry Fowles, who was nicknamed Babyface. As for their clothing, the Peaky Blinders stood out with their unique style to distinguish themselves from other gangs. They wore flat caps with short brims, cravats, loose trousers, jackets with brass buttons, and classic shoes. Another distinctive feature of this gang was the youthful appearance of most of its members. Despite all this, they were very violent. However, many historians believe that the scenario is exaggerated, especially since razor blades at that time were just beginning to appear, and only the wealthy owned them. After everything they achieved, the Peaky Blinders gang started to decline after nearly 40 years of controlling the city of Birmingham. After all their accomplishments, the gang entered a phase of dormancy, leaving the opportunity for new gangs to emerge, among them the Birmingham Boys, who had several conflicts with the Peaky Blinders. This ended with the defeat of the Peaky Blinders. Other factors contributed to their downfall, including the death of members in the war, the remaining members moving to villages, and increased surveillance by law enforcement on the gang. All these factors contributed to the extinguishing of the Peaky Blinders flame by 1920. Nearly 100 years later, in 2013, the BBC aired a series titled Peaky Blinders, which gained global fame and depicted their activities. But now, let's talk about the details of this series and compare its events with the real ones, and most importantly, who Thomas Shelby was. First, looking back at the history of the gang, we find that the Peaky Blinders gang was active in the late 19th century and early 20th century, contrary to what is depicted in the TV series, which is set in the 1920s, specifically after World War I. In reality, the gang that emerged after the war was the Birmingham Boys, as previously mentioned. The second difference between reality and the series is, but they were not as organized as shown in the series. To the extent that some of their actions might surprise you, Harry Fowles and Ernest Haynes were arrested for their involvement in bicycle theft. Stephen McNichol was arrested for robbing a textile shop. Taylor was arrested for possessing a firearm, and they were all sentenced to a month in prison before being released. Despite all this, it cannot be denied that the Peaky Blinders were skilled in illegal betting on horse racing, which remains a part of British culture to this day. By the time of World War I, many gang members died in the war due to conscription. Henry Lightfoot is considered the first to bear the title of Peaky Blinder. He joined the British Army 3 times and participated in the War of 1915 before the youngest gang member, Henry Fowles, who was buried during the war before being rescued. In addition to firearms, the Peaky Blinders gang used various sharp weapons, including knives, belts with metal buckles, and special shoes with sharp tips. There is also a common belief that the name Peaky Blinders comes from the razor blades sewn into the peaks of their caps, which they used to strike their victims. The character of Thomas Shelby and the entire Shelby family are fictional creations by the writer. Thomas Shelby does not represent any of the gang members. Rather, he embodies another character, Billy Kimber, who appeared in the first season of the series. Billy Kimber was a real person and was indeed the leader of the Birmingham Boys gang. Like the character of Thomas Shelby, Billy Kimber fought in World War I. However, after his return, he became more violent and brutal. He was a strong, intelligent man with high charisma. He was also known for his control over horse racing bets and was considered one of the most dangerous figures in Britain during that period. According to many historians, including Carl Chin, the Peaky Blinders gang in the series is quite different from reality. They were closer to the Birmingham Boys gang, which emerged after World War I. Today, the Peaky Blinders series has become one of the best series in history, admired by everyone who watches it, and has garnered millions of views worldwide. It is worth mentioning that Peaky Blinders consists of 6 seasons, with the last season released in 2022. And that, my friends, is all we have for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it and that it met your expectations. A special thanks to our loyal friends who watch the episodes from beginning to end, and to our new friends who have joined our family. Welcome, and thank you for watching.